Welcome to Thought Crime and Keto Crime, where Tracy does the sleuthing so you don't have to.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Thought Crime and Keto and Crime. Today we've got the story of Danny the Pope Johnson. Minister, Kentucky senator with a hugely interesting past. Let's just say that. This is going to be a real interesting one, though. I do put a disclaimer. It's going to contain descriptions of sexual abuse a little bit further in, so if you're not into that, I'll put timestamps down below to indicate, each part of this story as we move forward. And I want to give a shout out to several people. First, my two patrons. Like I said, I'm very small over on Patreon. If you want to support me, the links to Patreon are down below. I also put a link up here. But I want to give a shout out to my two patrons who have been so wonderfully patient while I get things going over there. Stephanie Mertz and Demelza Pasco. So thank you so much. Without you two, I wouldn't even have a standing over there. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for everything that you do. If you want to join us over there, I'm going to be doing a patron-only live stream twice a month. I'll also be posting behind-the-scenes footage, how I prepare for a case, how I research. You'll get a tour of my filming space. You'll get to see maybe what's in my Nana's curio back here. A lot of people have commented on it being a southern curio with all kinds of knickknacks back there. So I'll actually show you what's back there. So anyway, and also I want to give a shout out to the Kentucky Center for Investigative Journalism, specifically reporters R.G. Dunlap and Jacob Ryan. Their 7-month investigation of Danny Johnson, along with the accompanying article and podcasts, are my main sources for this video. I have researched other places as well. I'll put a link to all my sources down below with the timestamps. But a big shout out to them. And the most exciting thing, I have reached out to them, and they are perhaps going to consent to chat a few minutes with me about this investigation so that I can ask a few more questions for you guys. So be on the lookout for that. That if that happens, that will be, I'll promise you this, guys, this video, so I wanted to get it out on time. But if that happens, if they grace me with that, I will put that out as a special part 2 to this episode. So we'll hopefully get some, headway onto what it was like for them to investigate this case and what caused them to investigate this case. Anyway, so let's get into it, shall we? Remember, thank you so much. Hit the like button for the YouTube algorithm. It really helps. And with that, let's get into it. Part 1, background on Danny Ray. Danny Ray Johnson was born October 18th, 1960 in Bastrop, Louisiana. He was the middle child of Jerry and Charlene Johnson. He had an older sister, Teresa, and a younger sister, Rita. At the age of 7, a BB gun accident caused him to be blinded in at least one of his eyes. That was the story that his parents told Mr. Dunlop and Mr. Ryan during their investigation. However, they weren't it really wasn't clear about whether it was both eyes or one eye, but we do know that he was rendered semi-blind for a while. And at the time that it happened, the family was attending the First Assembly of God Church in Monroe, Louisiana, First Assembly of God, or anything that says Assembly of God, Church of God. I was a member of the Church of God when I was young. It is a Pentecostal church, and I have a whole video on snake handlers of Appalachia. Certainly not grouping these churches in with them, but I did attend churches that were snake handling when I was young in the Appalachian Mountains. So, yeah, if you want to know a little bit about the Pentecostal church, I'll link that video up here. But they are the types of churches that believe in faith healing and speaking in tongues, casting out of demons, the literal personification of the book of Acts in the Bible. So that's the type of church that they went to, and they attended under the tutelage of Pastor Gerald Johnson, who said that suddenly Danny stopped attending church at some point in high school. We don't know what caused that, but that is what the pastor relayed. Also, while there, and we're still not sure of the specifics because the parents really weren't clear about it, he was suddenly healed of that semi-blindness and had full vision the rest of his time in the rest of his life. That was never an issue. So he was healed of that at some point during his childhood. Dan graduated Bastrop High School in 1979 and pretty much left home right after, at the age of 17. He told his parents he was going to travel with the McKeithians, which was a Christian music group based out of my current hometown of Nashville, Tennessee. And he traveled with them for about 2 years. So he traveled all over the country. He got to see quite a bit. But during that time, he also married and impregnated his first wife, Tyla Harris. They were divorced before the couple was 20. And he had made his way by that time back to Bastrop, Louisiana, and ended up filing bankruptcy around the time of his divorce. So, he had traveled for a while, Nashville all over, singing with the McKeithians, and then come all the way back to Bastrop, where he got married very young and ended up divorcing probably less than a year later and then filing bankruptcy. And you would find that financial struggles would kind of circumference Danny Johnson and his second wife, once we get to the point we're talking about her, for many years, right up until his untimely death. So he always had a little bit of a problem with money. He also always had a little bit of trouble with the law. He had a couple of scraps with the law there in Bastrop. He and a girl that he was, I hesitate to use the word dating, and if you want to hear more about that story, definitely check out the brilliant work that R.G. Dunlop and Jacob Ryan did down below. I'm going to link all that below. But she gives a very interesting version of that story. But basically, she was an African-American woman that he was, let's just say, dating would be a kind word. They were friends with benefits. And they ended up being, and the reason I say African-American is that racial issues would become huge in his future. So that's the only reason I'm pointing out that she was indeed African-American. So keep that in your pocket for now. And they would, hook up from time to time and also hung out. They also had a couple brushes with the law. Well, it was right after that he left Louisiana and headed for the bluegrass of Kentucky. And it was there that he founded his own church in 7, according to the church's website, which is still up, and I'll also link that down below, called Heart of Fire. And it was founded just outside Louisville, Kentucky. Now, Heart of Fire was an interdenominational church because he never really said it was loyal to any one Protestant denomination, but so it was definitely a interdenominational church. But it wasn't just a church. It was part church, part biker bar, part political machine. The church brought notoriety to itself in the early 2000s and 2010s by starting to preach politics from the pulpit, which, if you didn't know, that is a violation of the statutes around churches being tax exempt. A minister, from what I understand, a minister can project values, on their congregation, because that's essentially what a church is. It's commonality of people with similar values that believe in a common God. That's a loose definition of it. So you can talk about values and principles all day, and I think people, by and large, are smart enough to look at what candidates might portray that for them. But they put themselves in jeopardy lots of times because Danny, who proclaimed himself not only as a pope, he would wear a hat that said Pope on it many times, and he would also proclaim himself as the bishop of Heart of Fire Church. He came into notoriety for preaching specifically for candidates for various offices, including Donald Trump in 2016, local candidates that supported their views on guns and race and all that. And so he would preach that from the pulpit, which definitely puts a church in risk of losing their tax exempt status, because we do have in this country something called separation of church and state. That didn't seem to bother Pastor Johnson, though. However, tax lawyers and stuff, even attorneys that I spoke to a friend of mine who is a tax attorney and real estate attorney here, he said that most of the time the IRS will not even bother pursuing those types of accusations because they just don't have the time or resources. So lots of churches get away with that. They really do. But more importantly, it was Heart of Fire was part biker bar, which meant they literally had drinking there, underage. We're going to get more into this a little bit later, but they had basically a bar attachment to it, a building that served as basically a biker bar and tattoo shop, where they preached, where they gave away drinks. You bought drink tickets or raffles for drinks, and you drank. Underage people drank there. They came into quite a few run-ins with the local Office of Alcohol Beverage Control. They were known for preaching Islamophobia, racism in general. There was toplessness at this bar. I mean, it was a swinging place. Let's just put it there. Just keep all of that in your head as we move on. So this church was alive and well until well after Danny Johnson's death. But before I get into more about Heart of Fire, I want to kind of briefly touch on Danny Johnson's run-ins with the law even after he left Louisiana. So let's get into that. October 18th, 1985, outside Louisville, Kentucky, police caught two people that were not Danny Johnson with Danny Johnson's 1982 Cadillac Coupe de Ville in a public park known as Cox Park near the Ohio River. They had covered the interior and exterior of the car with gasoline. The rims and tires were gone, and they were, by all accounts, about to burn this car when they were caught. Upon taking them into custody, both of them told the police officers that Danny Johnson had paid them about $250, which was about the equivalent of $475 in 2019, to kind of bring things into perspective, to burn the car because he wanted to turn in a false insurance claim and get paid because he owed $10,000 on the car, and both he and Heart of Fire were going bankrupt at this time. So they brought Danny Johnson in for questioning, and he claimed that he had been out celebrating his birthday with some of his co-workers from the church. They had left his car parked there, and left his car parked at the church, and the car had subsequently been stolen. However, once people in the local area were questioned by police, many people said they saw a large burly guy with blonde hair, which was Danny Johnson in a nutshell, drive the car from the church and leave the area toward the area of Cox Park. So it looked as though Danny Johnson himself had driven the car to Cox Park. Danny Johnson, though, did file a police report to the effect that the car had been stolen, but once they got the full story out of his two partners in crime, they immediately charged him with conspiracy to commit felonious arson, and also a misdemeanor of filing a false police report. Johnson later confessed to it. He said that he was going into financial ruin. Not only did he owe $10,000 on the car needed thousands of dollars worth of repairs that he just didn't have, so he felt it was just better to call it a loss. He pled not guilty, however, even after confessing, and you'll see a history and a pattern develop of Danny Johnson really not taking responsibility for actions. But he was sentenced to a 6-month diversion program, which after I looked it up is just kind of a counseling and public service type of program. The charges were officially dropped by the Louisville Police Department. 10 years later, when the incident was brought up, Danny Johnson would have a temporary case of amnesia and say he had no idea what happened to the car. It was just vandalized. Let's talk about gators, shall we, people? Yes, alligators. Police and local wildlife officials, after investigating reports of people that lived around Danny Ray Johnson, found a fully grown alligator living in a metal tub in Danny Johnson's backyard. He affectionately called the alligator Amos Moses after the Jerry Reed song about a preacher man. And eventually the alligator did disappear, and thanks to the brilliant reporting of Mr. Ryan and Mr. Dunlop, we learned that according to local wildlife officials, The alligator was confiscated because it's illegal to have exotic wildlife, especially dangerous exotic wildlife, as pets in the state of Kentucky, and Amos Moses was confiscated and subsequently euthanized. Now, I have to admit, I stopped my research at this point and shed a few tears because I am an animal lover, and this part really made me angry because why would you do that? Why would you bring a dangerous animal, probably from Louisiana, into Kentucky and then not even bother to, once you're under investigation for it, to send it back to Louisiana so that it could be humanely released into the Everglades? I don't get it. I don't understand it, but let's take a moment of silence for Amos Moses, shall we? Shortly after both of these incidents in 1987, February 14th, 1987, to be exact, he married his second wife, Rebecca Johnson, formerly Rebecca Wilson, in Jefferson County, Kentucky, and the two moved to a new home near Mount Washington, Kentucky in Bullitt County, and proceeded to have 5 children in addition to the child that he had with his. Remember the incident that happened just before the O.J. Simpson trial in 1992? The beating of Rodney King by police on television, and the subsequent 1992 Los Angeles riots in the areas of Watts. Yeah, well, according to Danny Johnson, he was there, and he was charged by local pastors. He went there as a church outreach, and his job there was to set up safe zones for people that were there, so that there would be areas where there was no violence, no looting. Now, we've been through a whole lot of rioting and pillaging recently, and I can tell you in all those cities it didn't look like there were any safe zones. I don't think that's a thing, and that was later confirmed by Dr. Cecil Murray, the pastor of the First African Methodist Episcopal Church of Los Angeles, who was on the front lines of the riots in Watts. Was asked by reporters if he remembered the large, blonde, white as snow Kentucky preacher there setting up safe zones, and Dr. Murray replied, "I don't recall any safe zones being anywhere in the area of Watts or anywhere in Los Angeles during that time, and during the 6 days that it went on, that wasn't really a thing, and I certainly don't remember a blonde-haired, blue-eyed preacher, which would have stood out, forgive me, like rice in the middle of chocolate cereal, to anyone that was there." He said, "I don't recall that happening." So, we know that his propensity to stretch the truth is becoming quite a pattern by now. Also, his propensity for arson didn't go away either, because on June 12, 2000, Heart of Fire Church did go up in brilliant fire. It was set afire. There were plenty of witnesses that said they saw a blonde-haired large man in a late model white Cadillac, because he always had a propensity for Cadillacs. This was not the same Cadillac he tried to torture others. This was the 1995 one, but he did have a propensity for white Cadillacs, driving away at the time the blaze started. However, when questioned by police, Danny Johnson blamed the Ku Klux Klan, saying that he had had some spats with them over their racism, and that's going to be laughable when we get to this next section, and they had torched the church. However, no one really believed him, even though there were never any official charges filed by the police in reference to the arson. His insurance company, Brotherhood Mutual, did sue the church for $1 to $1.75 million, which would be the equivalent of about $2.6 million in 2019-2020. And eventually the case was settled out of court, and the church was rebuilt and expanded to include what was known as the pastor's house right next door, which became the infamous biker bar I was speaking about earlier. Now, in this biker bar, they had political rallies. They had candidates in to talk about various issues. They served alcohol without a liquor license. They invited everyone because he was a leather-loving guy that loved Harley-Davidson motorcycles and guns. He did several promos for the website guns.com, and he invited everyone. They were free to open carry at the church and at this bar. They could get tattoos here. They could buy beer illegally, and even their children could drink, because according to Danny, anytime he had a run-in with local officials about the underage drinking or lack of a liquor license or beer license, he simply said it was a place of fellowship. It was no different than, the Baptists on Sunday bringing in potluck dinner and everybody partaking just because they chose to bring in alcohol and let everybody partake. It wasn't any different. Also, he said that because he was raffling beer and people were giving donations to the church in exchange for a beer, he really wasn't selling it. Didn't stop the Kentucky, ABC Beverage Control Board from finding him several times, but he did have several run-ins. He also had neighbors that lived around the church and the bar, let's be honest, that would call the police on several occasions. And I'm about to drop a couple of clips from guns.com that first shows the inner workings of what was known as the preacher's house or pastor's house, to show you what went on inside, the political speeches, the underage drinking, the guns aplenty, and also from Danny Johnson's own Guns and Leather Choir, which traveled around preaching and performing at various churches. So I'm going to drop those clips right here.
Place on August 7th, 2016 at the Heart of Fire Church. This church is half place of worship and half biker bar. A good part of the congregation showed up on their Harleys to show support for Donald Trump.
We are here today to help make America great again. And I know that we have, I hope, our soon-to-be president, Donald J. Trump.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Ironically, the money for that 2003 expansion came not only from the settlement with the insurance company, but from a 2003 loan from a federal program that was for rebuilding burnt down African American churches primarily, when there was a rash in the early 2000s of churches being victims of arson, and a lot of minority churches or churches that cater to people of color were victims of that. Well, Danny Johnson was able to use that same program to get a loan for $1.5 million to expand the Hearts of Fire into the preacher's house or pastor's house. Ironic, huh? It was determined and later confirmed when former HUD Secretary Henry Cisneros, who had been under President Clinton, said that Heart of Fire's loan did not meet the criteria for the program, but still somehow they were able to obtain it. The report later on went on to say that they did not meet any of the other criteria during repayment to try to get the loan forgiven. So as a result, in 2009, the federal government obtained the mortgage for Heart of Fire, and they were going to basically take the property because the loan had neither been paid nor forgiven. And of course, both Danny Johnson and Rebecca Johnson took to the airways saying they were being preyed upon, that they had used some of the money to help with damages to their home. They were the victims of a hate crime, and here they are being punished even more. And as far as I know, the church was never seized by the federal government, at least not in 2009. So somehow they were able to retain ownership of the church. And that must have been hard for them, because Danny Johnson was suffering from PTSD as a result of his service at 9/11. Yes, 9/11. The terrorist attack that almost brought America to its knees, September 11th, 2001. Now, I don't think there's a person that's over 30 today that doesn't remember where they were when that happened. And according to Pastor Danny Johnson, he was there. He also said he had been a chaplain to Presidents Clinton and both Bushes, which was later confirmed by the Kentucky report as being false, because the official chaplain at the White House does not exist. That's not a position. There are people that provide spiritual advice to our leaders, but there's not an official White House chaplain. So that was proven to be wrong. And also, Danny Johnson said that he was at 9/11 and there at Ground Zero, and he was tasked with the awful job of setting up morgues for the bodies as they brought them out of the wreckage and administering last rites. And that's something that he did. However, upon speaking with people that were actually there at Ground Zero doing that sort of work, they all collaborate that it was a group of Catholic priests that were charged with that job, and they never met nor heard of the large blonde-headed preacher from Kentucky. However, it was determined that his entire income for the years 2016 and 2017 showed that Danny Ray Johnson was receiving disability benefits from New York workers' compensation as a result of PTSD that he received from working at Ground Zero, even though no one could really prove that he had ever worked at Ground Zero. But somehow he was on the payroll for the disability fund for those at Ground Zero, and that PTSD would be something that he used in his speeches and used to show how he was a great man that turned his life around. That would be something that he literally harped on for years after 2001. Those tall tales weren't enough. There's one final one. He even lied about his education. He said under oath many times that he had held a doctor of theology and philosophy from Kingsway University and Theological Seminary in Iowa, and upon further investigation, a representative of the school said he had indeed attended some classes there, but had never graduated and held neither an official or honorary degree from the university. And so you can file all that into with many others that I won't actually cover here, into the large book of Tall Tales by Danny Johnson. Now, let's get into probably the most heart-wrenching part of this story, shall we? Let's get into what happened New Year's Eve, 2012, at Heart of Fire. At age 8, Miranda Richmond started attending Heart of Fire Church in 2004 with her father. She became quick friends with several of the Johnson children and actually considered Dan Johnson as a second dad. She attended all the parties that went on in the little pastor's building on the side, aka bar. Also, everything that happened within the church, and including that was drinking alcohol underage and also doing sleepovers. There was an area under the church with large L-shaped sectional sofas and a bedroom where often Pastor Johnson or whoever got too drunk above could actually go to sleep and sleep it off. And she often slept over there on the couch with the Johnson children and Dan and Rebecca Johnson as well, who would sleep in the bedroom. So she was attending one such party, New Year's Eve 2012 into New Year's Day 2013, whereas everyone had been drinking a little bit, especially Dan Johnson, who was, according to her, roaring drunk. It was at this time that they all decided to retire to the underground apartment. Dan Johnson's children, some of Dan Johnson's children, and Dan Johnson himself. And she had to help Dan Johnson along with his daughter, but one of them on either side of him helped him down the stairs in his drunken stupor. And she said while going down the stairs, his hand went up her shirt and actually began feeling on her. Now, she thought maybe it was an accident because he was drunk. Maybe he thought it was his wife. So she didn't think too much about it until they got him into the little bedroom, and then her and the children went out to the little living area and began watching movies. And it was A little bit later, that Dan Johnson stumbled out of that bedroom and told them all to go to bed. It was late, and that he was going out. He was going out with his friends to another bar to finish ringing in the new year. So the children went to sleep, including Miranda, on that L-shaped couch, and Dan Johnson went off to do whatever it was he was going to do. Well, a little bit later that night, she awoken to Dan Johnson kneeling over her. He actually put his hand up her shirt and felt in places where you shouldn't feel unless you're invited to, and never on an underage child. She was 17 at the time, and also eventually made his way down into her lower regions and did things to her that you should never do to anybody without consent, and never an underage child. All the while asking her if she enjoyed it, trying to kiss her in the mouth, trying to kiss her on her stomach, and she eventually pushed him off of her and got him off of her, and he eventually stumbled into the bedroom area, and she didn't hear from him the rest of the night. She said she lied awake the rest of the night because she was scared he was going to come back, and finally around 7 or 8 in the morning she got up and left, wanting to be gone before he woke up. Finally, the next week, they had actually, she had actually missed church services at Heart of Fire. Dan Johnson messaged her the following on her Facebook Messenger. Sarah said I was mean to Bo and you by telling her and you all had to go to bed. So sorry, I don't remember. I was told we all got drugged at TK's, which is the bar he had gone to. Anyway, so sorry if I sounded mean. You know you're one of my favorites. Love you, sorry. Boaz did great Sunday. Your future husband, Johnson. I think he was referring to the boy Boaz as her future husband, not himself. Miranda immediately messaged him back the following. What you did was beyond mean. It was evil. Drugged or not, I think you know what happened that night, and that's why you're sending this message. I never thought something like that would happen to me, especially by someone like you. I looked at you as a dad, but now I sincerely hope I don't ever see you again. I might try to maintain a relationship with your kids, and there is no point in responding to this message either because I don't want to talk about it ever again. She eventually told her parents what had happened, and in April of 2013, they actually did visit the police and actually make the report. At that time, the Louisville police asked her if she would be willing to have another conversation with Dan Johnson or a Facebook exchange in the hopes that he would incriminate himself, because they said they needed a confession. She had also, between January and April, been seeing mental health professionals and had suffered her own bout of real PTSD as a result of this. She did attempt to reach out to Dan Johnson by leaving him a voicemail asking if they could talk. He never responded. And eventually her father was able to have a brief voice exchange where Dan Johnson claimed he didn't remember anything, didn't know anything about it, would never do that. And so the case, unbeknownst to Miranda and her parents, was closed. The police just closed it for lack of evidence. Now, I don't know if there was some political conspiracy going on there, because we're going to maybe find out why, but the case was dropped, and like a lot of these cases, kind of swept under the rug because they had undercharged it. And by this time, by the time they concluded the investigation, a statute of limitations had passed on the third degree rape that they had actually charged or was considering charging Dan Johnson with was a misdemeanor, and its statute of limitations was elapsed. Whereas if they had actually charged him with first or second degree, there would have been no statute of limitations. So the police really botched this up. They really did. But this was laying the groundwork to Dan Johnson's ultimate demise, which we're going to get into right now. So why are we even talking about this perverted preacher? Why do we care? Well, in 2016, Dan Johnson decided to jump on the Trump train and attempt to win the 49th District's state seat for Bullitt County, the county in which Heart of Fire resided, in which he resided. Originally, the Republican Party of the county and state had nominated a woman named Jennifer Stepp, who was actually a congregant at Heart of Fire, who was eventually disqualified because they said she had filled out her paperwork incorrectly. And later on, Stepp would actually reveal, as part of this huge investigation, that she was facing a lot of attacks from the rest of the church, Dan Johnson's ilk, as she said, because they considered her a Republican in name only. They considered her too moderate or too liberal to actually represent, and she disagreed with that. She said, I'm a true conservative. I'm just not, I wasn't radical right, but I was a true conservative. However, because of that loophole, the county Republican Party and state Republican Party asked her to step down. She refused. It went all the way to a judge who agreed with the Republican Party and disqualified her from running in the race. As a result, the Republican Party set about looking for a replacement to face incumbent Democrat Linda Belcher, who had held the position for several years since taking over after her husband, who held the seat, was killed in a car accident and had won re-election since then. So Dan Johnson was their selection. Dan Johnson was their selection, and he started what could only be construed as a smear campaign against the 69-year-old Linda Belcher, who was a retired teacher and high school principal from Bullitt County, which was the majority of the district in which they would be representing in Frankfort, Kentucky. This was a state representative, not a national representative. He started a true digital smear campaign against her. He attacked her, he attacked the Democratic Party, and he attacked then-seated President Barack Obama. And some of the posts he put on Facebook were so wild. I'm a freedom of speech person, but he put some of the most wildly racist, sexist things on Facebook that I've ever seen. Even the Republican Party condemned him for it and wanted him to drop out of the race, but he refused. And if you would like to see those posts, I'm not going to put them in this video because this would probably be taken down as a result. So I am putting a link to a Google Drive that I have established for this case, where you can see all of the things I'm talking about. He put posts that reflected Michelle and Barack Obama as apes. He put wildly terrible things about the Islamic religion and about, now I'm not criticisms of Islam, not professional, well thought out criticism of religion, which I can give you a million different criticisms of a million different religions because I'm an atheist. It wasn't like that. These were just really attacking brown people, for lack of a better way of putting it. So if you'd like to see those posts, I'm going to put those links down below. But anyway, he never once showed up to debate Linda Belcher. He told out-and-out lies from the pulpit every time he could get in front of a television camera, saying that she had hired Chicago thugs. The 69-year-old woman had hired Chicago thugs to threaten him, threaten his friends, threaten his family, his children, his grandchildren. He was laying it on thick all over Facebook, Live, Facebook, gun.com, whatever he could get in front of, he was laying it on thick. He never once showed up to debate her at any public debates, and he actually accused her of being a commie flag waving leftist who was pro-choice and had killed 84,000 babies since being in power. Lots of stuff. He called her Lying Linda Lou. He jumped on the Trump train and said that it was Donald Trump and Dan Johnson against criminal Hillary Clinton and Lying Linda Lou Belcher. What an actor. So she vehemently denied, because she says, I don't know what he's talking about. She was a moderate, guys. She was a true moderate. She was pro-life herself, although she did agree with a woman's right to choose, so she was against abortion herself. She had a concealed carry permit. She was pro-Second Amendment. She was a true moderate. She was an old-school conservative Democrat that would today, because of the Overton window, be considered a moderate. She was in no way a flag-flying leftist. Let's just put it that way. He also lied, said that Trump's longtime supporter, Ted Nugent, had held a rally for him, which was later denied by Ted Nugent's people. So just lots of stuff. But believe it or not, on Election Day in 2016, he was able to beat her by 156 votes. 156 votes got him that congressional seat within the state of Kentucky. And also, just for political geeks like me, Bullitt County, that same county that voted him in, 75% of the vote went to Donald Trump in the presidential election. Johnson started serving at the Frankfort, Kentucky House January 2nd, 2017. His first thing was to propose a bill to make abortion illegal in the state of Kentucky, which is wholly unconstitutional based on the Roe v. Wade ruling that was never passed and would have been struck down by federal courts if it had passed. Under that bill, physicians that performed abortion could be charged with fetal homicide, which is a felony, basically murder. The only difference is it wouldn't be eligible for the death penalty. So any doctor that performed an abortion under this bill would be sentenced to life in prison. He also tried to start several different bills concerning freedom of speech. One of them would have forced public universities to allow, basically, I hate to use the word hate speech because I am a free speech. I believe you should be able to say whatever you want to say, pretty much whatever you want to say, without interference of the federal government. And that goes for publics and universities. So I sort of agree with him on this. But the problem of allowing anything to be said in the public universities also leads down a road of people talking about child pornography and other things that I think should be illegal. As far as I know, the acts themselves are illegal, but also speech about them should be illegal as well, in my opinion, especially when you're promoting them to certain people. So it's kind of a fine line, I suppose. He also wanted to say any internet accessible computer sold in Kentucky would be fitted with software to block obscenity, pornography, and anything about prostitution. So while he wanted to be free speech public universities, he wanted to curtail your right to look at porn or to solicit a prostitute online. As I said, I'm a free speech purist. You can't have it both ways, Dan. So his whole stance was weird and radical, to say the least. But he did quite well, even though none of his stuff really passed. He was a member of the House's Committee on State Government, Tourism, Small Business, and Veterans Affairs. So he did develop good relationships with other congresspeople and the governor of Kentucky at the time. Around April of 2017, the Kentucky Center for Investigative Reporting, under the brilliant reporting of Pulitzer Prize winning reporters R.J. Dunlop and Jake Ryan, started a expose on Dan Johnson known as the Pope's Long Con. And the links to that article on their website, as well as the accompanying podcast, are down below. I highly encourage you read it. If you have an hour of time, it's an hour well spent. Very well done, and I really hope that I'm able to speak with them, please. Anyway, they started their 7-month-long investigation of Dan Johnson. They talked to everybody. They conducted over 100 interviews, went through hundreds of thousands of documents to make sure that the information they were giving was correct. They attempted to speak to Dan Johnson many times, and every time he would tell them it was fake news and hang up. Because amongst the fake news that they were able to dig up was Miranda's Richmond story, which he called fake news and hung up on them many times. They attended some political rallies and biker rallies that he was at, attempting to get a comment from him. He basically told them to leave him alone. He was going to sue them. The same from his wife. Nobody on the Dan Johnson team would talk to them. So they did the report without him. And on December 11th, 2017, that article dropped, and it was a viral sensation, especially in the state of Kentucky. As a result of it, both the Democratic and Republican parties both called, as well as the governor, called for him to resign. He refused. He contended that he was the victim of false allegations, that last election cycle it was racism. Now this election cycle it's sexual abuse, that any politician that doesn't live up to the mainstream liberal media is being charged with sexism now or sexual assault now. Now, some media can be very slanted toward one political side or another. You just have to learn to discern from it. But what you're doing, your history is not normal. You're not just you weren't just an innocent politician that was held up to some unfair scrutiny. You did all of it. You did all of it. And you didn't even want to defend yourself. That's how arrogant you were. So, yeah. Also, the Democratic mayor of Metro Louisville initiated a review of the 2013 allegations, which meant that old investigation, irregardless of a statute of limitations, was reopened. So Dan Johnson was in some trouble. On December 13th, 2017, he held a press conference at Heart of Fire Church, where he denied any accusations of sexual assault. He said that, again, it was all about politics and blah, blah, blah.
And the shame of this, and I just want to say this, here's what I think. I think this is an assault on all real people. This is an absolute assault on real people. There's no perfect people. And you get into office, and all of a sudden political hacks want to come against you and start accusing you after you're in office of things. You know, in my situation, 30 some odd years now, 5 some odd years ago, where were all these things at before I was in office? Where?
Representative Johnson.
Later that afternoon, around 4:59 p.m., after he had gone to lay down with his wife, who had a migraine, he was going to lay there next to her and hold her while she had a migraine. I have migraines. That's a sweet gesture. That really is. Once she said that he was there with her, and then he got up. She thought to put another log on their fire, but he never came back to bed, and she fell asleep. At about 4:59 p.m., Johnson posted the following message on Facebook. Now, my good friend and great stand-up comedian and impersonator, Ian Harris, is going to read this in a very spookily close match to Dan Johnson's voice. So this is what's posted on Facebook. Then we're going to come back and finish.
The accusations from NPR are false. God and only God knows the truth. Nothing is the way they make it out to be. America will not survive this type of judge and jury fake news. Conservatives, take a stand. I love God. I love my wife, who's the best wife in the world. My love forever. My mom and dad and family, and all 5 of my kids and 9 grandchildren, 2 in tummies, and many more to come. Each of you are a total gift from God. Stay strong. Rebecca needs you. 9/11/2001, NYC, WTC, PTSD 24/7. 16 years is a sickness that will take my life. I cannot handle it any longer. It has won this life. But heaven is my home. Please listen closely. Only 3 things I ask of you to do if you love me. 1, blame no person. Satan is the accuser, so blame the devil himself. 2, forgive and love everyone, especially yourself. 3, most importantly, love God. P.S. I love my friends. You are family. God loves all people, no matter what.
Upon seeing that many people in the Bullitt County called local 911 and said that perhaps they should check on him, his wife got up, saw the message, was worried. They couldn't find him anywhere, and eventually he was found on a nearby lake in Mount Washington, Kentucky, dead of a .40 caliber self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. Time of death was officially listed as 8:20 p.m. Very next day, Rebecca Johnson, at a told a group of reporters that this was a high-tech digital lynching of her husband, and that she blamed everything on those greasy little reporters from the local NPR, which was Kentucky Center for Investigative Journalism. And he was officially buried December 18th, 2017 in the Mount Washington Cemetery. Rebecca Johnson made an attempt to take over her husband's House seat in the special election that was held in February of 2018, but lost out to Linda Belcher, who had been encouraged to run for her former seat, and she won handily. And as more things came out, it was just, let's just say Rebecca Johnson has attempted to take over and keep her husband's memory alive. She started preaching at Heart of Fire. She started really trying to keep his memory alive and keep it going in a good way. And she went so far as to blame voter fraud and electoral fraud for her loss to Linda Belcher in the special election, although none of that was ever proven because it just didn't happen. Anyway, that's the story of Dan the Pope Johnson. As I said, please check out the special report below by the Kentucky Center for Investigative Journalism. I really hope I get to speak with those guys and ask them some questions. If you have any questions you'd like me to ask, feel free to drop them below. If I get to do it, I will definitely bring that to you very, very soon. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back real soon with another video. Thank you so much. Keto Comic.